Welcome everybody to the presentation today about how to modernize mainframe application faster using Amazon Q Developer. My name is DOP221-NEW. I lead product for the transformation capabilities of Q Developer. With me today, we're going to have Alexis Henry, Senior Software Manager for Amazon Q Developer Mainframe Modernization, and Dave Tsai, Vice President of Engineering and Enterprise AI at Toyota Motors North America. Let's look at the agenda for a second. We're going to start at talking about the challenges of mainframe modernization. Then, after a high-level overview of what Q Developer can provide you to accelerate mainframe modernization, we're going to give it to Dave to present his experiences with Q Developer in the context of mainframe modernization at Toyota. Then Alexis will dive deep into the capabilities and the features and how to use Q to modernize your mainframe applications. The reason we're here is that mainframe applications are extremely large and complex. They're the result of decades of evolutions of technologies and functionalities. And the technologies that are built on really makes organization and taming this complexity hard. What you see here is a graphical representation of a large, not even very large application on the right side, 3 million lines of code with their connections of all the different files. And on the left, there's a galaxy. If we dive deep in this complexity, we see that each mainframe application and each mainframe is a galaxy of complexity in its own. The little image that we showed earlier about this 3 million lines of code application has 3 times the numbers of connection as the US national power grid, 6 number the amount of parts as an airliner, and more than 1,000 books worth of information. The problem is that is a smaller mainframe application. In verticals such as healthcare or finance or automotive, applications reach easily 100 million lines of code, and that results into 100 times the connections of the US national power grid, more than 200 parts, more than 200 times the parts of an airliner, and more than 30,000 books worth of information. Now, this amount of information in this size usually overwhelm the teams that are in charge to modernize the systems. They have to analyze, plan, obtain approvals, and execute these modernization projects. Let's dive a little bit deeper in the challenges of the modernization. The first one is that these projects are usually, very often, multi-year projects. This is due to many factors, one of which is that usually there's no documentation available for this mainframe applications. Also, each individual task of these projects tend to be labor intensive, often due to the specific technologies used by these applications. The whole process is also delayed by the fact that these applications power critical systems for the business, requiring utmost care and during their modifications. There's also technical complexity. These applications are monolithic applications. The various functionalities are all commingled and coexist and insist on the same pieces of code. The code is written in a very sequential way, which makes it hard to understand, disentangle these functionalities, and translate them into more modern ways to write code. It's also likely that your organizations managing these mainframes usually work in silos with limited collaborations due to the evolution of these technologies. Finally, there's also scarcity of expertise. This is, of course, due to the fact that many mainframe experts are leaving the workforce, taking with them knowledge of mainframe systems and mainframe-specific languages such as COBOL, PL1, and so forth. But there's also often limited knowledge about the cloud architecture that is supposed to be the target of the modernization. Yesterday, we announced the mainframe modernization capabilities of Amazon Q Developer. we announced the first generative AI system for large-scale modernizations of mainframe applications up to hundreds of millions lines of code of large size. Q can support and guide the modernization process across many phases and across many activities of your modernizations, from analyzing the code base and finding dependencies, generate documentation for your existing mainframe assets, decompose your monolith into functional domains, taking into account code and data dependencies, plan your migration process, prioritizing and sequencing the modernization waves, and finally refactoring your mainframe code into cloud-ready Java. Now, one thing that is important to understand is that Q is pattern agnostic. All of these phases and capabilities can also be used if you choose to modernize your mainframe not with a refactor pattern. Also, if you want to reimagine, replatform, augment, or replace. How does this work at a high level? Q provides a unified web experience where your team of experts with multiple roles can collaborate on a mainframe modernization project. Users can start transformation jobs with specific goals, and AI agents autonomously look to accomplish these goals. These goals can be specific tasks, such I just want to generate documentation, or I just want to decompose or plan, or something more complete. Hey, create like a POC starting from this specific functional domain, from analysis through documentation, planning, and refactoring. The AI agents work autonomously to reach those goals, but they reach out to humans in case of approvals of intermediate artifacts, and in case it gets stuck in tasks that cannot be performed autonomously. This is very important to establish trust between the team and the AI. Of course, Q takes advantage of the latest foundational generative AI models, but the AI tools that are used are mainframe specific. We combined not only generative AI, but also mainframe specific AI tools, taking advantage of neural networks and automated reasoning, and mainframe specific tools for code analysis. In the last few months, many customers have been taking advantage of Q to accelerate their mainframe modernization efforts. Now, please join me in welcoming Dave Tsai to talk about his experiences in using Q Developer in the context of the mainframe modernization efforts at Toyota.
Thank you, Elio.
Thank you, David.
Hi, everyone. How's it going? I'm actually really excited here to talk about the mainframe subject, as you all are here. The mainframe actually has been in our business for a very, very long time. So by way of introduction, my name's Dave Tsai. I lead an enterprise AI team. We're an engineering team and an operation and program team that is intended to roll out all of generative AI to Toyota North America to accrete value from the systems. And when we looked at the mainframe, which is over 45 years old for Toyota, that runs a big chunk of our business, we saw a huge business opportunity for us to accelerate what we're doing and create value from that. By the way, our partnership with AWS isn't necessarily our first rodeo in trying to modernize our mainframe. We've attempted multiple times to modernize the mainframe. Some of the challenges that you see here is the aging mainframe system. Many of them are probably older than all of you, including myself, right? There's a lack of documentation because there's an aging workforce that has left the organization, and there's a lack of general talent of COBOL technology, mainframe technologies, and so forth, right? And last but not least, agility and scalability. The really important thing about the agility and scalability is that some of these changes would actually take a very long time. Our systems actually run on very basic sets of batch jobs for our supply chain. So what we really wanted to do was transform that, use some of these technologies to transform that. All that said, my colleague yesterday also shared the fact that this isn't our first rodeo. We actually attempted something like this with another hyperscale partner, and that failed. I'm just going to be very honest, right? And that's part of the reason I'm really excited here is that we've seen some success here in generating I want to say, explainable documentation on legacy code that has been buried for years and years and years. All that said, the mainframe system is a very, very important part of our business. It runs a significant part of our supply chain, and that's why we did multiple runs and attempts at this as well. So the solution that we took a look at was the Amazon Q developer for mainframe modernization. I was actually here last year when I spoke to Alexis about the burgeoning opportunity of generative AI to help tackle some of these problems. The solution that was provided was very raw at the time, I'm going to have to admit, but through the partnership and the refinements, we're actually able to create a powerful code analysis tool to analyze all our COBOL code, RPG, and even JCL jobs, right? In addition to that, the documentation that was created, we created with multiple personas. And what's really powerful about those personas for us specifically is that we have business analysts, we have engineers that need to read the documentation as well. So the documentation that was generated for the business analyst, it actually was able to walk through a ton of logic. Again, that's been buried in code for decades. We're able to surface that in something that's understandable for the engineering needs of today. We're also able to use the engineering documentation and the use case to be able to describe what the code is actually doing, right? So a lot of that documentation that's created, it can also be interrogated as well. So what we did was, within our supply chain system, we processed roughly about 100+ documents, and those documents were verified by our business analysts, by the future engineers that are going to modernize some of that code, and they were all validated with very, very high precision as well as quality. So our benefits, as I mentioned earlier, you can probably derive a lot of what I stated earlier, right? There's a clear understanding of the code itself and what it does, the exceptions, and other things that is key to running our business. Our operational efficiency becomes much clearer and much better as well, because we'll have better structured code and an understanding of what we need to do, either to lift and shift or completely transform those processes, either from batch jobs into real-time systems as well. Last but not least, well, there's two more things. We're aligned with the business need primarily because we generate business persona-based documents with engineering coupling of those documentation for better explainability. And last but not least, we are closing that knowledge gap, which will actually help us accelerate our journey. We're investing a lot of money transforming our mainframe systems for the next, what the supply chain would look like for the next generation. And this is definitely helping us along that journey and accelerating that quite well. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alexis, who will talk to you more about the product as we've experienced it during the co-build and partnership.
Thank you, David. Yeah. Well, I do my best to explain in more details because Helio and Dave did a good job at it already. So, sorry. So you skip that one, so that's okay. So, mainframe modernization is mainly a journey into which you transport your business or some of your businesses from an existing architecture to a new one, which can be extremely different. So usually customers, organizations are extremely nervous about whether they can make it and if they can actually have a migration strategy. If they can answer questions such as, where do I start? Can I start with that business domain? What are the consequences? Because I have dependencies. Can I define priorities? Like I want to start with my, I don't know, like warehouse management, and I want to do sales optimization after. So that's a lot of questions. They appear to be simple, but they are extremely complex to answer because, as we've seen, any mainframe application is complex, is big, is made of multiple, I would say, interdependencies. So there is a real need to automate the analysis of the code in such a way that you can get different options that you can consider and that you can present to your team or to your management, to your leadership, to say, here is how we are going to do a migration. Here is how I can prioritize. I can retrieve the business source which is buried into my code. So Q developer transformation for mainframe is an agentic system that is made of two main things: an advanced orchestration layer, which will be able to combine specific, I would say, specialized mainframe agents. So on the surface, you will see agents for doing code analysis, document generation, code decomposition, migration sequence, and the code transformation. But there are much more. There are approximately 15 agents in total doing a global reasoning to present you with a migration strategy that you can actually execute. So we are not only advising you on how to do your migration, you can actually ask Q to actually execute that migration as well. So Q is an autonomous agent. As it was explained before, you're going to give an objective to Q, and Q will produce, I would say, a migration plan. It will present it to you for review, and if you accept it, it will execute that plan. Okay, you have the opportunity to do a multi-turn conversation to adjust the plan if you wish to do so. But from there, once you approve, Q will basically manage everything for you. It will involve you and your team only in two cases. The first one is in case of missing dependencies, like missing source files or missing configuration for your kick system or your configuration for your scheduling. So in which case Q will jump to you immediately saying, well, there's something missing. It would be best if I could retrieve it. The other case is human in the loop, where Q is going to decide to interact with you and your team to receive input from you on some specialized task. Example of that is the code documentation, where you want to select some files. You don't want to generate the documentation for everything. Or when you're generating the migration planning, you want to input your priorities. Like, I want to start with my code management system, and you want to see the result of that planning. And you may agree or disagree, and you may want to influence how Q is going to produce the migration planning. So a typical example would be like, I want to better understand my code, and also I need to simplify my migration. You will see Q is flexible on the way you can interact with it. There's a knowledge base as well, which allows you to ask questions like general knowledge question about mainframe migration or how to use the tool specifically. But what you will get is an action plan that is going to be distributed to different team members. Okay, so in this case, we can see that the code analysis is a silent task. Nobody will interact with Q on that. But if you're interested in doing like document generation or code decomposition, then Q will most probably involve you in the conversation. Okay, Q will decide if it involves you or if it does not. Task with a certain arrow, like code decomposition, means that you have the opportunity to interact and refine your conversation with Q before you end off to the orchestration layer again. Okay, and you have the capability to do this again and again and again. So it means that you have the opportunity when you generate a plan. In fact, you're creating a job. Okay, so in this case, the job contains all of the steps. You can see the analysis, the document generation, the composition, and so on. But you may want to create different jobs. One job could be your main pipeline, your main transformation pipeline, that is going to decompose, do the code migration, put that onto S3, and an S3 event will trigger your code build and code deployment. But you may have a developer that want to do something different, or you may have a project manager that want to consider a different strategy. So you may actually define another job with a different objective to consider a different option. So you have the capability in few days and weeks to be able to build your migration strategy by considering different options. And when you're iterating, when you're restarting a job, you have the opportunity to refine your objective, go into more details, or to provide more input, in which case Q will execute only the agent that needs to be restored and will remember the previous result and will update the migration strategy or the code generation or the code decomposition or the documentation. Okay, so Q kind of remember what it did before and will consolidate results when you ask it to refine. Okay. So usually the first agent that people are interested in is documentation generation. Mainframe applications are different from other applications because they are there for decades. Usually there are 1, 2, or 3 generations of developers like us that have been maintaining those systems. So nobody that was part of the initial design is here. So there is usually very few documentation, and there are much more business rules that we believe initially in the system. So the documentation agent is here to start from the source. It will actually analyze all of the source code. It will analyze the dependency graph as well that you have between programs to create an extensive documentation. You have at the moment 2 kinds of documentation level that they've introduced as persona, a high-level documentation or a fully detailed documentation. The high level is mostly for I would say, architects that want to understand the application globally or for a subject matter expert, while the detailed decomposition allow you to dive deep into the code and see how it's structured, what are the business rules, what are the data operations, and so on. The good news is you can actually refresh the documentation anytime. So if you do any code change while you're doing your modernization, it's frequent that the code is still evolving. You can constantly refresh your documentation as you need. You're modernizing business. It might sound weird, but everybody says it's code migration, but it's mostly business migration. So you want to have the capability to slice your monolith into business domains. Mainframe application can be anything between 1 million line of code and 1 billion line of code. I've seen customers which have multiple billion line of code in the same kind of domain. So we have created a new type of models that allows to decompose a monolith into business domains. So it's not a technical decomposition where you try to find modularity. It's really linking the semantic of the application to the structure of the logic. And it works by providing a few examples. So you would say that kick transaction is part of my card management domain. That batch is part of, I don't know, my credit management. And with these examples, Q is going to be able to analyze the structure of your monolith and decompose it into business lines. The result is you can decide first you're identifying the boundaries between your different line of business. And the second benefit is it allows you to actually build your migration plan. You're moving away from a very complex system with millions of dependencies to a business map, which I will present, made of 20, 30 business domains. So you get a lot of clarity in how things are structured at the business level. And we use that simplification to be able to generate automatically the optimized migration strategy. Like you will start with card management, then you will do credit, and I will bundle those 2 other domains together. But you may not like that optimized strategy because you have your own priorities as a customer. So Q allows you to define your priorities. You may define that a domain may come first, last, in between, that you want to group 2 domains together. Q will, in less than 2 seconds, reproduce the planning for you based on your priorities. And it will figure out what is the optimal trade-off between the constraints that you formulated and the reality of the dependency between the different domains. So as it was said before, you will be able to trust the advice that Q is going to give to you. Usually a good plan is a plan you can execute. So everything that Q is advising you to do, Q can actually execute when it does a code transformation. So if you chose to decompose your system, then you have the capability to say each domain will become an independent application. And it will be generated this way, it will be packaged this way, deployed in this way. So you can do microservice decomposition, you can do modularization. If you did it in the decomposition phase, then you just have to ask you to use that information for the code generation part. And Q does that fast. The migration sequence is done in seconds. Decomposition is usually done in minutes. The definition of the action plan is done in 10-20 seconds as well. And the code generation, it's approximately 1 million lines of code per 10 minutes. So you have the capability in a day to consider 5-6 different migration strategy and see the result immediately. You can look into your code. So I'm going to run a small demo to go into the detail. So in the demonstration, I'm starting with like a multi-tenant conversation. I initially say that I'm interested in doing a mainframe migration. From there, I say, well, before I go into it, I would like to better understand the capability that you have for mainframe modernization. And Q will get back to me with the capability that it has. So Q is self-aware of what it can do for you. If you ask like a general question, you would get a list of, I would say, all capabilities that Q has, but you can ask more detailed question and ask Q to be more concise. And then it will go into how you can actually do it. Like I'm asking, like, tell me more about code and documentation in this case. So Q is getting back to me explaining, well, I have the capability to preserve the institutional knowledge. I can create 2 levels of documentation, summary or detail. I can do different kind of things. But we can as well say, well, tell me more about the structure of the documentation that you're going to generate. In which case you get already the list of chapters you would have in each documentation for each program. So like the business context, the main feature and functionality, data flow, I/O operation, error management. So you can choose what is the level of detail you're going to get into the documentation. Same thing is going to happen with the other domain agent I spoke of, like code decomposition, migration planning. So I will not stop the process here, but it explained to us that code decomposition is here to break a monolith into smaller modules to simplify your migration. And it relies on examples that we call seeds, because they are going to propagate information into the dependency graph. And it explains how to choose seeds, what they are, how they are going to be propagated. Okay. So every sub-agent has a dedicated knowledge base that you can use to interact with Q to better understand how to use it and what benefit you will get. Okay. So unfortunately, I cannot accelerate the demonstration, so I ask you a little patience before we go into the next step. So in here, we're discussing the planning capabilities and the code generation capabilities. So in here, for instance, let me make a small pause. I said, well, I did a decomposition. How can I use it for my code generation? Can I actually generate per domain? And Q said, of course, if you want to do it, you can go into the left pane in the web application, and you will select the domain that you want to migrate, and only those will be produced. So now that I feel ready to move on, I'm going to ask you to basically go through all the steps. So I'm going to say, okay, I want to do code documentation. I want to do decomposition, planning, and code generation. I'll try to, let me see if I can move a bit forward. And so Q is generating the action plan based on that information. Okay. So the first thing Q is going to ask me is, where is the code located? Okay. In the case of mainframe, you can typically select an S3 bucket that is in your account, so that Q does not have a copy of your code. That is extremely sensitive to customers, that we don't have a copy of the code. Sorry, I need to get back in time here. And once the code location is provided, Q will do a first code analysis. If I can make it stop. Sorry for that. Okay. So, if you give me like 5 seconds, and I will not stop the demonstration from there. Okay. So, Q will first present you with the result of the analysis. So, in this case, we will go into, no, we're in the documentation generation, sorry. So we are generating the documentation for that file. Q did it in few seconds, so it decided to switch to presenting the decomposition with us. So you have the opportunity as a user to click onto the result of code decomposition, and here I'm providing a few examples to Q about the code business domain in that application. So I'm going to select 3 COBOL files that I know are part of that business domain, and that's the only information I'm going to provide to Q. I'm going to do that for a few domains in that case, but you have as well the opportunity to say to Q, well, I want that you identify those seeds automatically from the Kix definition file of the scheduling engine. And this would be the original application. So we see that there are multiple connections between many programs. And the end result, in fact, is this business domain decomposition. So we can identify, I have to go close it, like we have account management, billing, transaction, menu, card. We have common component, and so on. So one key feature is Q will make the difference between the business domain and the business and the common component that are making connection between all of your business domain. It means that the common component are going to be promoted into library when you do the code transformation. And those components are going to be inserted at build time. So we are removing that runtime dependency. You don't want to do a microservice strategy for common components. You want to promote them into libraries. So Q knows how to do that. And once we've done the composition, then we can go to planning. And by default, Q is going to basically build a plan for me, which is what we are going to review at the moment. But you have the opportunity to disagree with you and say, no, I don't want admin to be the first domain. I want to do it at the end. I don't need my admin module. I want to start the testing of my functional domain. So you can actually interact and change any priority in your migration plan, and Q will get back to you with an updated plan in real time. And as you can see, it will group things. When it thinks that it will facilitate your migration by grouping those in the same migration way. So in this case, we see that Q decided to start with the common component, the data cross references, the data loading, and the file management. That is because that application is mainly a batch application. So there is a lot of data loading and cross references. So that is like a framework within the application. So Q decided to start with that part. And then it will say, okay, I'm going to continue and I will do admin, billing, and menu. That's a proposal, right? So there is no absolute guarantee that Q will actually produce your perfect plan, because it will mitigate the dependency between the business domain as well. Okay, so usually Q find a way to satisfy 90 to 95% of your constraint, but if your constraint goes against the dependency, it will adapt the migration plan to make sure that it is successful. You don't want to deploy something that is missing a dependency when you migrate from the mainframe to AWS cloud. From there, you can trigger, Q will trigger the code generation. And because I selected only a few domains, Q is going to generate only those domains. And in the end, Q will present us with dashboards with the result of all the, I would say, specialized agents that took action to convert your code. Okay. One thing I do not demonstrate here is the capability that you have to rerun the same job to provide new inputs. Like you said, well, I did a decomposition, I want to change it. I need some more documentation to analyze the business domain. And you may ask to Q, say, I want to do one more step in my code documentation, and then I want to go straight to planning. Q will actually trigger only the right sub-agent to do that, and will reconsolidate the result as I previously explained. So those are the typical dashboard that we've seen. We have the result that we were expecting with Q. We're significantly accelerating all the phase of your product, understanding your code, documenting it, coming with a migration strategy and the capability to provide options to your leadership so that they feel that you know what you're doing when you say, well, I will be successful migrating that mainframe. I have a strategy, I can prioritize, I can give feedback to you. If we change mine, I can immediately present to you what is the impact and what is the new strategy. That usually allows to reduce the assessment phase that can be a year long to a few weeks. And you feel much more comfortable with your strategy because you can actually put it in action. You can actually generate your code, or you can give it to a developer team which is going to do a reimagine by taking the documentation and re-implementing the code. You know what you're doing. You're no longer trying to figure out what was the mainframe doing. And the key thing is you can do that now without the need for specific expertise. Previously, you would need people like me that did that for 15 years to give you some advices, avoid the typical trap and mistakes in doing a migration. Q is now going to replace me, and I will come only when it is extremely difficult or when I need to further train Q so that it provides more value to you. So you're going to be capable to modernize application by yourself. So that is something which is very new. There are more sessions today and tomorrow if you want to further investigate Q or mainframe modernization. We have still 15 minutes if you want to go with question and answers. This is not something we can do here. We need to do it outside the room. But I'm more than happy to answer any question you would have on Q transformation for mainframe. Thank you so much.